right, welcome back to 5G Monetization Forum. We've got a great panel discussion for you here, and it's my pleasure to introduce our guest moderator, Eugina Jordan, Vice President of Marketing with Parallel Wireless.
Thank you so much, Sean, for this introduction. So as a moderator, as I was getting ready for this panel, I was wrestling how I'm gonna introduce all these amazing contributors, innovators on 5G. You're looking at the screen and you're seeing 5, including me, women. But let me ask you a question. When you attend a panel of all men, do you ask that question when there are 5 men on the panel? And then this morning, as I was asking myself that question, I found a quote from Billie Jean King. And for you that don't know who Billie Jean King is, she is a star tennis player that in 1971, she ensured that female tennis players were making as much prize money as men. And then she went on to create different associations. This Sunday, she participated in a coin toss, and this is what she said. It's hard to understand inclusion until you have been excluded. And I'm proud to be part of this year's Super Bowl coin toss and the NFL's commitment to bring us together and make us stronger. So I applaud RCL Wireless for bringing all of us together and making the industry stronger. Representation matters. And let me introduce to you some amazing speakers on this panel that I've known for quite a while. They're amazing humans, they're amazing individuals, they're amazing innovators. So I'm gonna go along my screen how I see you ladies. So Jillian, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Julian Kaplan, and I lead telecom and 5G thought leadership at Dell Technologies. And I have been in telecom my entire career. Before coming to Dell Technologies, I spent almost 14 years at Verizon. Started there as a central office engineer right when we moved from copper to fiber, which in some ways feels similar to the transition from 4G to 5G. I was a product manager there and then moved into some marketing operations and sales enablement roles, and then joined the Dell Technologies team. So thanks again for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to have you here. And you were a tower climber at some point as well. So you know telecom inside out.
Inside out.
Inside out. Okay, so let's go next to Beth.
Yes, so I'm actually at Verizon and a product manager in the software-defined networking product group. So we are working on a bunch of different things related to 5G, and particularly around fixed wireless access. That's a big push, for Verizon, because I really see that as it's not just Verizon actually. There was big announcement a couple weeks ago that all the major telecoms have rolled out nationwide 5G in the US, and of course it's been already rolled out globally in other places. My specific part of 5G is that I'm involved in the marrying our various 5G components with our various managed network services. So integration is my middle name. But I also work in the open source community and am very involved in the EDGE working group for the Open Infra Foundation, as well as one of the co-chairs for the technical steering committee for the Anakit project, which is a project to develop reference architectures to support software-defined networking for the telecom industry, including 5G.
What a great introduction. So Diane.
Great. Thanks, Eugenia, for having me. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Diane Ronaldo, and I currently serve as the Executive Director of the Open RAN Policy Coalition, a coalition of 60 global members that are advocating to policymakers all around the world the benefits of moving to Open RAN solutions. Prior to that, similar to Jillian, I have worked in telecom for most of my career in different capacities, mostly on Capitol Hill, where I worked on the security side. And I also worked with House Energy and Commerce during the move from 3G to 4G. And then prior to my current job, I was acting administrator at NTIA, helping with the rollout of 5G. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you all today, talk a little bit more about 5G. And I look forward to going on a little bit of a deeper dive with Beth to see if she was involved in that cable guy commercial, learning that she's now the fixed wireless person there.
Great.
That is awesome. And last but not least, Renuka.
Thank you, Eugenia. Thanks for having me here today. This is Renuka. I'm part of the Meta connectivity team. And what we are doing is we're partnering with the telecom industry to get open and disaggregated solutions and improve the connectivity experience for the people. Again, at the heart of it is connecting people, and that's what we live for at Meta, and I'm very excited. And I'm actually liking this. So most of us are coming from a telecom background. So did I. Before joining Meta, I was part of companies such as Intel, and all my career has been throughout based on the telecom industry's progression from 2G to now 5G. So again, excited to go deeper on that and learn from you all as well.
Thank you, Renuka. Yeah, you and I, we've met 8-9 years ago in Reddit, 9-10 years ago. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We've all been around telecom from 2G, 3G to 4G. Today we're talking about 5G. So, and the question I'm going to ask my panelists is, what is the winning architecture for 5G? We hear software defined, we hear Open RAN, we hear virtualization. So, Beth, what is your take on the architecture? What do we need to keep in mind?
Well, you need all of those for a successful deployment of 5G. And, 5G covers a lot of things, right? As Diane mentioned, Verizon had the cable guy commercial, but that's just sort of one piece of it. So really 5G is a lot of things, and it requires all of those tools to deploy it. And one of the things is that it's high speed, capacity, and bandwidth. There's enough of it so that we can deliver what's called fixed wireless, which is literally that you have, as you saw, a little white cube in your house that where you get your internet over the wireless network. Now, you've been doing that for years on your cell phone, but of course, the dirty secret in the industry is, of course, there's limitations. There were with 3G and 2G and 4G, there were limitations to the amount of bandwidth that was available. And with 5G, that is no longer true. So that allows us to do really interesting things with it that we've never been able to do with wireless. And another reason, of course, is that wireline is expensive, right? Laying cable, in the old day, we're still relying on a lot of the copper plant that was put in literally in the 1930s, particularly in the rural areas. And that's just not going to deliver the kind of speed and capacity that we need to be in the modern internet era. So this is really, getting back to the architecture, we're going to use the kitchen sink.
And one of those pieces that will go in that kitchen sink is Open RAN. So
yes.
Let me ask you thank you, Beth. Let me ask you this question. Why do you think that Open RAN is the architecture for 5G?
So I will agree with Beth that it is the kitchen sink, and that 5G is allowing us to be nimble as we move forward. And Open RAN is such a critical aspect of that, 'cause it's really changing the way we look at Gs moving forward, where it does allow for those open interfaces, and so that you can easily change your network. As I like to say, the network that you're building in New York City looks a lot different than the network in my hometown of Rumford, Maine, population 5,000. So we need to create networking that allows our carriers to be nimble, to be able to provide services to their customers. And then as our needs change, as technology changes, we want something that's going to be able to quickly pivot with it. And this is what the build up to 5G has created. It has created a conversation that has moved from when I was on Capitol Hill, from moving from 3G to 4G, as I mentioned, it was all about spectrum. And now, yes, it's incredibly important, but network is also a topic of conversation as well, and how that's really a game changer. And I think that you will see this moving forward into 6G as well.
So why do you think that network is now so important and it is the center of any conversation that we're seeing out there in the industry?
Yeah, so I think, as we've seen, especially, point to Beth, as we've seen with C-band, we have very little green space left when it comes to spectrum. We are in this position because the US has been dominant for so long. We have so many unique users. So how do we get to do more with what we have? That's going to be equipment. You're going to see a lot more coming online with AI and artificial intelligence and spectrum sharing. So we need to be able to build a network that can incorporate all of these tools to bear, so we can do more with less.
I completely agree. We need to do more with less. So Jillian, what do you think more is all about? What are the use cases that 5G can enable?
So I think that the biggest use cases that people see, and the ones we talk about the most, are really in the enterprise for 5G. And I see this a lot. People talk all about different use cases in the enterprise. And at Dell Technologies in the past year, we built out, stories around manufacturing and healthcare. And we're looking at things like travel and autonomous vehicles. And I have actually started to build out a retail campaign. And as we started to do that, I started to look a little bit more at the need for 5G and consumer, because I hear a lot of people talk about, oh, consumers don't really need 5G. And I have to be honest with you, it kind of frustrates me when people say that, especially as someone in the industry, because I feel as though we really need to be supporting the carriers, because we need to share with other consumers that they are going to need 5G. And when we were discussing this, as we were rehearsing, Diane brought up the great quote, right? If you build it, they will come. And I think it's so important, because at this very moment, no, there are not applications on your phone that you have to have 5G to run. Will it make your phone faster? Yes, it will. But if we can get enough people on 5G phones and we can deploy 5G, in enough locations, we're going to be able to enable the next generation of inventors to enable amazing applications that we don't even know exist today. And as I was looking at like these retail use cases, I thought it was like a great application of, being able to connect people with these virtual shopping experiences from stores to online, and having like an app on your phone that requires that the 5G data loads, right? Like you need that 5G connectivity in order to manage the amount of data that would be coming in. So while I think that the biggest and probably most lucrative use cases are in the enterprise for the carriers, I also think it's very important that we support the carriers in deploying 5G to consumers, especially right now as they're building out the networks.
Great point. So Beth, when we were rehearsing, I wrote a quote from you: stop overhyping 5G. What does that mean?
Well, I will not argue with Jillian that 5G is super important. And is certainly being taken up by the enterprise first. However, Diane, you mentioned C-band. C-band is enormously important to get out to the rural areas. You know, what I was thinking in terms of the overhyping of 5G is people keep talking about, oh, 5G is going to be like the game changer. Well, yes and no. You know, for one thing, a lot of people have mapped 5G to IoT and Mac, which, you know, 5G enhances, you know, the Mac experience, but it is not essential for the Mac experience. But there's, you know, where 5G is critical is where we're applying, you know, logistics. Now, self-driving cars are kind of overhyped, but where the money really is for self-driving is in so the supply chain, the trucking industry, the shipping industry. That all requires that kind of bandwidth. 5 drones is another example where you really need the detailed GPS location. Otherwise, they're bumping into trees, literally. And that's where you need the 5G. But I also see it as a huge boon in the rural areas because, you know, right now, in the rural areas, we're sadly still relying on a huge amount of copper wire that's over 100 years old. And Jillian, you were a network engineer, so you know what happens with copper wire over 100 years. It gets an awful lot of splices in it. and it degrades. Like literally, it stops working, it shorts out, you know, it's a terrible, you know, and you can't get the bandwidth that you really need. And that's where the 5G can really shine because it can really extend out to the rural areas the broadband bandwidth that they need for telemedicine, for example. That's huge in the rural areas. You know, there are areas that are healthcare deserts, and this can really extend that reach out to those people. Education, you know, we all got sent home, and everybody, you know, all the kids were you know, learning on the, you know, on their laptops and on their internet. Well, you know, my kids are great because, you know, I have a gigabit service. I have Verizon Fios is great service. But that wasn't true for a whole lot of people. So that there's, you know, yes, it's a revolution, but there's a whole lot of other pieces that go into it.
Great answer. And I'm going to switch us to another piece for 5G because we've been talking about the technology, the use cases, the architectures. I want to switch from technical to a business view. What I've noticed is there are new partnerships emerging with 5G. Governments, regulators, organizations like TEEP or an alliance. So we have two representatives here that can talk about the efforts that governments might get involved in to make sure that everyone is covered with 5G. So Diane, what do you think?
Yeah, so one of the things that we really focus on at the coalition is those public-private partnerships. We don't advocate for mandates, but we believe that working with governments can provide that thumbs-up stamp of approval in moving forward. And while this is the private sector movement to go out and build 5G, there are lots of use cases for the US government. In particular, the Department of Defense has invested a lot of money to roll out DoD test beds on different bases around the country. So that's something that I know a lot of, and probably a lot of the companies on this call today are focused on, as well as the FCC, NTIA. They all have a role to ensure that 5G is rolled out safe and effectively. And it's not just in this country, but it is globally as well. So you can see allies in developing nations working closely together, ensuring that we are syncing up when it comes to standards and standards participation. And then, of course, how we interact with more developing nations where they're still struggling to get 3G out there, and how can lessons that we are learning right now help them improve their posture moving forward.
Absolutely. And that's a very nice segue to Renuka from Meta, because TIP and Connectivity Phase Meta Initiative, they are all about bringing connectivity. But how can we bring 5G connectivity to those areas? What are the use cases? And what is the role of organizations like TIP or an alliance?
Sure. So these type of partnerships are so essential for 5G to be successful. These partnerships actually are enabling right from the standardization to the implementation to all the way up to the test and validation that we do for these solutions. And as Diane said, they also touch what we call the policy and other aspects. The government is looking at 5G not only for the cell phones to improve the speed experience, we are looking at multiple verticals which can be touched upon. We are looking at a global society where you can basically bring in the 5G advantage to the forefront in terms of driving different use cases. And again, I think Beth touched upon it too, the industrial use cases, the healthcare, whatnot. This is all going to be important for 5G to anchor on. And at Telecom Infra Project, this is one of the platforms which is a community-driven platform that we have been supporting for a few years now. 1,500 plus companies. We are bringing in partners, because again, 5G is not about solutions which are, say, monolithic, coming from one party only. We are talking a multi-party approach here. We are talking about each one's skill set coming in a way that it's enabled on open interfaces. So working together, collaborating with each other to drive and build the acceleration point for technologies such as Open RAN, but even beyond. So I think that is all going to be more and more prominent as we move on to 5G, for that matter, even towards 6G. And not just for rural networks, maybe even for all the types of networks and use cases, enterprise to all the way up to say macro and whatnot, but even touching the global kind of transition towards technology. So yeah, that's what is going to be what the aspects of society are looking for from 5G.
Very, very interesting. So the next question, if the audience stayed with us until now, they're gonna love the answers, because I have the notes and I'm loving them so far. So, ladies, what are the lessons learned from the front lines? Because many of you are right there deploying, developing, installing 5G. I'm gonna start with Beth, and I'm gonna ask her a question. What have you learned at Verizon about virtualizing your network?
Oh, wow. So, yeah, I was involved in the launch of one of the earliest edge products, virtual network services, still going strong after 4.5 years now. And oh my God, the lessons are, first of all, operations was not ready for virtualization. It was a foreign concept to them. And so, any kind of rollout of 5G or any virtualized service in the telecom industry, you have to work with operations. We ended up rewriting most of the rules. We ended up rewriting a whole lot of our services because, in our processes, just because, the hardware and the software disaggregation is just such a new concept to these people. The other thing we learned is hardware and software disaggregation sounds great on paper. It doesn't actually exist in real life. And we ended up setting up a maintenance engineering lab. It's also the tier 4 developer. It's a tier 3, tier 4 lab for maintenance engineering, but it's also the development lab, which was a fantastic thing because the same people were working on, things that failed in the field and figuring out what went wrong, but also were able to fold that knowledge into new releases and improve the products as we go, which was something that was never done before. the whole idea of having operations and the product development groups, literally closing the circle, was new, and I think it has been very fruitful. But yeah, there were a lot of rocks we stumbled over along the way.
And those rocks, Renuka, I'm going to go to you. I think TIP is trying to organize those rocks or put them in some sort of organized manner, right? So there's so many labs that TIP is opening up. So what Beth is describing, you are addressing at TIP.
Absolutely, and I can totally relate to what Beth is saying. It's a long, hard road which we are on, right? Because transition in telecom takes a lot of effort. It takes a village. So in that example of how we are bringing those challenges from the partners, especially the operators and the service providers, and how are we driving? So we are helping to harmonize the requirements early on, harmonize the use cases that the MNOs are looking at. And what that drives is not just the technology part of it, but also helps them to think through the operational, think through the business aspects of how to deliver a solution, how to deploy it. And the hardware and software disaggregation, yes, so that's at core for Open RAN, for example. Yes, it's not easy. We are talking about multiple different products working like Lego blocks with each other alongside standard interfaces. We have been driving this through partners like ORAN Alliance to see that the right standards and APIs are in place, but it all comes together when it is in the lab. And that's where the what they call it, the rubber meets the road, and you go through the steps of, is the tech ready? Is the test and validation really uncovering the problems that we are seeing, which need to be handled for the field deployment, not just in a lab environment? And all of that is kind of getting towards, I would say, 3 key steps, which are going to be important going forward. We got to support a flexible and sustainable supply chain here. So we got to have a diverse set of partners who are willing to bring their solutions against the open interfaces and not have a custom kind of integration all the time. That's one. Second is we got to support innovation in different areas. Even just for RAN, we are talking about the RAN of today, and then we are talking about the RAN of next generation, where you want to enable tools such as AI ML, and that is going to help us to figure out where the performance optimizations are, or where you can do a better resource allocation for the network by applying certain methodologies. So that's going to be important. And again, we are driving a lot of proof of concepts here with the help from MNOs, and we expect that those POCs go and trial into the field and then merge into the deployment scenario. And then the last but not the least, we are looking at ultimately lowering the cost, and that is for deployment as well as the operations, right? So for lowering the cost, which is very important for the operators, you're looking at, again, the other parallel industries, you would say, such as the IT and so on, and bringing in some learnings from there, such as, say, an example of, say, CI/CD. How do I do network management in an optimized way? How do I have a continuous integration and development so that the field network is catching up with what is staged in the lab? So all of these aspects are kind of necessary, and that's what we are trying to drive with our partners, and see that has made a huge effort in terms of accelerating some of the Open RAN deployments. And that is, again, important for 5G, but also for the next generation network. So yes, that's where I'll give it back to you, Eugenia. And
I think we're going to give it back to Diane because she has so much experience working, deploying Open RAN, and she hears from regulators and governments and operators. So what have you heard?
Yeah, so I will say from kind of the policymaker, and there continues to be a lot of excitement around 5G and around Open RAN. Typically, especially in Washington, where I've spent my career, issues tend to have an 18-month shelf life, where people get very excited about something, and then news cycle changes, and then it gets backburnered. But 5G and Open RAN has something that's really been percolating out there for a while in Washington. And it's not. And so when we first formed, we actually 6 months into it brought on someone to handle our international realizing this is in fact a global conversation. So we spend the majority of our time now talking to policymakers worldwide. And it's because it's vendors and countries, it really allows that innovative spirit to take hold. So there's new vendors popping up. It's so exciting for me to have conversations with people, talking to someone in Johannesburg tomorrow to talk about their ideas and technology and how it's really changing the face of telecom.
Oh, that is absolutely amazing. I want to get to Jillian because just like TIP, Dell is doing some innovative work on Open RAN by piecing all those blocks together so they can be easier to deploy.
Yeah, and Dell Technologies has been a hardware vendor for a very long time for CSPs, right, for communication service providers. And one of our biggest lessons moving from 4G to 5G was that we really need to make sure that we're truly open and that we're building solutions and not just selling hardware. And so what we've done is open what we're calling OTEL, which is the Open Telecom Ecosystem Lab, which is open virtually right now and opening in Austin, Texas, physically later, Round Rock, physically later this year. And it's a lab where we're actually like piecing together, stacks and solutions to save telecoms time and money in making sure that these solutions work and make them easy to deploy, different Open RAN solutions, and help test different stacks so that things are just easier. And things, we know that not every single stack is going to work for every single use case, and that's why we built this lab so that we can deploy things faster, cheaper, easier for everyone. And that's really our focus, to keep a truly open ecosystem and work not only with partners as partners, but also with the telecoms as partners as well. And I know all the women on this panel brought up partnership and that it truly takes a village, and we feel the same way.
So what I'm hearing from you ladies, so 3 things are important: partnerships and ecosystem, technology, and thinking about the end users, either consumers or enterprises. So there's a question from the audience that is relevant to the third one. Can you share thoughts, Beth, on what the new revenue opportunities network slicing offers?
So network slicing has been a little slow out of the gate, and partially it's because I think it's taken a long time for the standards bodies to kind of agree to it, agree to what network slicing actually is and what it means and how it should be deployed. And the standards are still not 100%, and we've been working on them for at least a couple of years that I know of. But I see network slicing will really allow us to use the deployed plant out there, the towers and the antennas and all the equipment more efficiently and more effectively. So, and that's very important because obviously this is billions of dollars worth of infrastructure that's being put in, and similar to the DWDM revolution a few years ago that really was able to take the fiber and use it far more efficiently. I really see network slicing is doing that in a similar way, and that it uses what bandwidth is available much more effectively and efficiently. The other part that I think is really going to be the killer app, if you will, is that network slicing offers a whole lot more security. Wireless networks, by their very nature, being open, anybody can sniff the packet because it's just there. So you really need to think much more carefully about encryption and how the head ends need to be far more secure than wire networks. So that, I think, is really going to be where it really shines.
Thank you for that answer. And the person that asked this question, if we didn't answer, you can find us on LinkedIn and send us a DM for additional information. So we only have 4 minutes left. I just looked at the panel title and Women Driving Transformation and 5G Technology. So ladies, it's a question we didn't practice, we didn't prepare. What are you personally the most excited about 5G? And we'll start with Jillian.
What am I the most excited about? Oh, man. I would say actually probably one of the things Beth brought up, which is one of the healthcare, getting healthcare out to more rural areas. We were just looking at that use case, being able to see patients, remote patient monitoring, really being able to get people the services they need, even if they're not physically where the services are. Like I really hope that maybe not, there's like Beth said, there's many different parts of building the network, but I really hope that one of those parts can help people. And it's really the people helping piece of 5G that I find the most exciting.
That is amazing. Diane, what are you excited about?
I am most excited how 5G is powering the fourth industrial revolution. We need to look at the digital highway the same way we're looking at the physical highway these days, with e-commerce, with remote work, and every part of our lives is somehow connected to a connection. And so we need to be able to take care of these connections and ensure that we keep our spectrum pipelines going, that we are providing networking solutions that are going to be future-proofed. So I just really think that 5G is kind of the catapult to all of these things.
And Beth, do you think if we get 5G right, it's going to be 5G?
So, ironically, I think that the COVID pandemic has really pushed 5G and really, everybody went home. The network traffic literally changed overnight. And 5G is really, people are realizing that, we are coming out of this with a whole different way of how people work. I don't know about you, but I've been working from home for the last 2 years. And you know what? I'm more productive than ever. So 5G can drive that even further. And as I mentioned earlier, the rural areas will really benefit from this far more than anybody. So, people no longer have to, they can live and work wherever, right? So that's people are rethinking fundamentals, and 5G is going to be part of the answer.
Wow, that is such a great question. And Renuka, take us to your answer.
Sure. So great points that everybody said. So I'll say two things. I'm excited about how 5G is converging industries. It's not limiting to one sector at all. So everything is coming together in terms of verticals and in terms of what you expect from a technology in terms of data throughput, but not just that, latency and whatnot. And then the future that it shows. And I'm going to use the word metaverse. So it's going to show and give us some learnings on how the network can do even more. And we can transport ourselves to metaverse. And to Beth's point, we can be even more productive. We can be on gaming and have even more quality user experiences in terms of connection and what it can do. So yeah, that's what 5G and maybe even 6G will be about.
Wonderful, awesome, ladies. So it's been a Women Driving 5G Transformation panel, and we hope to see you on our RCA Wireless next event soon.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much for joining that discussion and sharing your perspective with our audience. Thank you, Eugenia, for moderating the panel. And I'd encourage everybody to join us at 25 past the hour for a keynote interview with Verizon Business Group CEO Tammy Irwin.
She's cool.